Our story begins the morning after yet another dragon attack on the island of Berk. The night before had been chaos. Astrid's arms still ached from hauling bucket after bucket of water, slamming the heavy load against smoldering rooftops. Fishlegs had stayed glued to her side, fumbling with his aim but trying his best. Snotlout and the twins had turned firefighting into a competition, who could knock the most burning debris into the sea, until Stoic himself barked them back into line. Above, dragons wheeled in a black sky lit orange by the village's flames. The air reeked of smoke, wet ash, and the sour tang of fear. Somewhere in the middle of it all, Hiccup had disappeared, and when he returned, soot-faced and wild-eyed, he swore, loud enough for everyone to hear, that he'd shot down a night fury. A night fury. The unholy offspring of lightning and death itself. The village laughed, of course. There's no way Stoic's talking fishbone of a son caught anything. The forest was quieter than it should have been. Astrid Hofferson tightened her grip on her axe, stepping over a tangle of roots as shafts of morning light cut between the pines. The others preferred the training arena for practice. Wooden dummies, safe boundaries, and the approving eyes of the village. But Astrid liked the woods. The air was sharper here, untainted by the constant clang of metal and barked orders. And it gave her a place to hide from Snotlout and his romantic attempts. Today, though, the stillness felt wrong. Even the birds were silent. She caught it, a sound barely above a breath. A low, throaty rumble, not unlike the growl of a wolf, only deeper. She crouched, moving toward it on instinct. Her eyes fell on the shape half hidden in a dip between mossy boulders. A dragon. Not just any dragon. The beast has obsidian black scales instantly, even though no one had ever been close enough to confirm their existence. A night fury. Her pulse spiked. Every Viking dreamed of this moment, a chance to take down the unkillable. She raised her axe, the weight comforting in her hand, then froze. The dragon was tangled in a mess of rope and counterweights, the kind of trap only one person in Berk would waste their time building. Hiccup. Astrid's jaw tightened. Of course it was him, and from the looks of it, he had actually succeeded. She stepped closer, eyes locking with the creature's. It thrashed weakly, the ropes cutting into its sleek body. Its gaze was wild, but not mindless. She could kill it now. One clean swing. That would be the end of the mysterious terror of the skies. She'd return to the village with its head, and the glory would be hers. Fearless Finn Hofferson would be proud, knowing that House Hofferson wouldn't be held down by his unfortunate incident with the Flightmare years earlier. But deep down, she knew it wasn't her kill. The net said that much. The kill belonged to Hiccup. Astrid hesitated, then exhaled sharply and lowered her axe. Lucky, she muttered at the dragon, though she wasn't sure who she was talking to. She turned and broke into a run, leaping over fallen logs until she burst into a small clearing. Hiccup was there, bent over, panting, like he'd been searching all morning. His eyes went wide when he saw her. Astrid, have you seen it? He asked, breathless. Astrid didn't answer right away. She just studied him. For all his flaws, there was something in his face right now. Fear, yes, but also this stubborn spark that refused to die. Finally, she jerked her chin toward the trees. I found your dragon. He blinked. The night fury, she says. She shoved her axe into his hands. Go finish it. Hiccup's mouth opened, then closed again. He nodded stiffly and followed her through the underbrush. When they reached the dip in the rocks, Toothless looked up, eyes narrowing. Astrid stood back, watching Hiccup step forward with slow, careful movements. He raised the axe. He hesitated. And just like that, Astrid knew he wouldn't do it. Hiccup refused to do it, and so he hurried off without hesitation, disappearing into the forest shadows. Astrid hissed in frustration, then swung, not at the dragon, but at the ropes. The net sagged, snapping loose. The night fury stumbled free, hissing, and then it screamed. The sound ripped through the forest, sending birds exploding into the air. Somewhere behind her, branches cracked under hurried footsteps. Before she could turn, the dragon's tail whipped around. The blow knocked her sideways into the dirt. Air burst from her lungs as she rolled, eyes flashing to the tail. Only half of it remained. The end was jagged, torn. "Astrid!" he shouts. Hiccup burst into the clearing, wide-eyed. He stopped dead at the sight of her, the dragon, the broken tail. He asks if she's okay, but the dragon's tail gave her quite the hit. But she'll live. Hiccup helps Astrid back to the village and grabs her some ice for the incoming bruise. The walk back to the village was quiet, except for the crunch of pine needles under their boots. Astrid's cheek was already swelling where Toothless's tail had slammed her, the purpling bruise standing out sharply against her pale skin. Hiccup kept glancing at it, guilt gnawing at him. "I'm sorry. If my net had actually worked, you wouldn't have—" "It's fine," Astrid said curtly, keeping her eyes ahead. But her jaw tightened. The truth was, she didn't even know why she hadn't finished the job. She should have killed the Night Fury. She'd had the perfect opening. They crested the last hill, the smoke from Berk's chimneys curling against the cloudy morning sky. When they reached Astrid's house, her mother was already waiting at the door, arms crossed. "Astrid, inside, now." Astrid hesitated just long enough to glance back at Hiccup, as if daring him to say something. He just offered a small, awkward nod before turning toward his own home. Inside, Astrid barely had time to sit before her father spoke. "Your mother and I have talked. You'll be starting dragon training with the other teens tomorrow." Her heart leapt. Tomorrow? Really? Her mother's gaze narrowed at her bruise. "Yes. If you're going to be fighting them, you'd better be ready." Astrid allowed herself the faintest of smiles. She'd been waiting for this her entire life. Hiccup wasn't so lucky. When he walked into his house, Stoic was seated at the table, sharpening an axe. "Good news," Stoic said without looking up. "You'll be starting dragon training tomorrow with Astrid and the others." Hiccup's stomach sank. Great. Because what could go wrong?" "This is your chance to prove yourself," Stoic said, finally meeting his son's eyes. "No more messing around, no more mistakes." He paused, looking Hiccup over with an unreadable expression. "When I was your age, I thought the same as you. Kill a dragon, prove yourself. I was ready to hand you this." He gestured to a broad-bladed axe leaning against the table. "The moment you could open your eyes, but your mother would have had my head for it." Hiccup's eyes lingered on the weapon. He didn't pick it up. Didn't want to. When Stoic left, the room felt too big and too quiet. Hiccup sat at the table, staring at the axe, then slid a stack of sketches over it, using the weapon as a paperweight. By the time the sun set, he'd almost forgotten it was there. The morning sun broke over Berk in a haze of salt wind and gull cries. The training ring stood ready, its iron gates yawning open like the jaws of some slumbering beast. Inside, crude dragon dummies glared from their posts, scorched and hacked from years of abuse. Barrels of shields leaned against the fence and weapons lined the racks in neat rows, a far cry from the chaos they were meant to unleash. Astrid arrived early. She'd been up since dawn, the kind of restless energy only battle anticipation could summon. Her braid was tight, her axe polished to a gleam, and her stance already squared toward the ring like she could take on a monstrous nightmare then and there. She was ready. No, she had been ready for as long as she could remember. Today wasn't just training, it was a proving ground. Hiccup shuffled in some time later, dragging his feet as though each step was a personal betrayal. He'd barely slept. Visions of netted night furies, screeching dragons, and Astrid's bruised cheek had kept him tossing until the sky began to lighten. Now, the weight of Stoic's unspoken expectations pressed like a boulder between his shoulder blades. He didn't belong here, not with people who actually wanted to fight dragons. Astrid caught sight of him and frowned. "You look like you're heading to a funeral." "That's not far off," Hiccup muttered, glancing at the axe Stoic had given him, still bearing a smudge of soot from the night before. He didn't even remember bringing it here. His eyes flitted to Astrid's cheek, still faintly marked from the Night Fury's tail. Guilt churned in his stomach. Before he could speak, Gobber's booming voice split the air. "Right! Welcome to dragon training! This here's where we turn you lot from scrawny excuses for Vikings into dragon-busting warriors. He clanked a hook against the nearest shield, the sound reverberating through the ring. Astrid's grin was sharp as steel. Hiccup's face fell even further. Dragon training was all the chaos Astrid had hoped for, and all the misery Hiccup had dreaded. Snotlout couldn't go 3 seconds without flexing at Astrid. The twins fought each other more than the dragons, and Fishlegs rattled off endless dragon stats instead of actually defending himself. Meanwhile, Hiccup skulked along the edge of the ring, ducking fireballs and wishing he were anywhere else. After the session, Hiccup slipped away, heading for the forest, and eventually stumbling across the cove. There, he spotted the Night Fury again, struggling to launch into the sky, crashing back down, wings flaring in frustration. Hiccup's gaze dropped to the missing half of the tail. He quickly sketched the scene and made a note in his book before hurrying home. But when he reached his doorstep, he stopped short. Astrid was sitting there, arms folded, waiting. Hiccup froze halfway up the steps, clutching his notebook against his chest like a shield. Astrid was perched on the stoop, elbows on her knees, chin tilted up, her braid falling forward over one shoulder. She looked like she'd been there for a while, judging by the impatient tap of her boot on the wood. "Finally," she said, standing. "Do you always sneak off right after training? Or is that just for today?" Hiccup fumbled for an answer, his mind still buzzing with the image of the Night Fury tumbling back into the cove. I needed some air? All the, fireballs?" Astrid narrowed her eyes, studying him. For a moment, he thought she might push. Instead, she gave a small shrug and crossed her arms. "Well, don't get used to ducking out. The rest of us are here to actually learn how to kill dragons, and we can't afford dead weight." Her words stung, but Hiccup only nodded, mumbling something about sharpening tools. Astrid sighed, stepping down from the stoop. "Tomorrow's going to be worse. Try to keep up." As she walked away, Hiccup let out the breath he'd been holding. She had no idea what he'd just seen, what secret was sitting, helpless, only a short walk beyond the village. He glanced at his notebook, the sketch of the crippled dragon staring back at him. Then he shut it tight and slipped inside before anyone else could notice. The days blurred into a rhythm Hiccup hadn't expected. Training in the morning, Snotlout bragging, the twins brawling, Fishlegs rattling off facts while Astrid cut down every dragon target in sight, then afternoons stolen away in the cove. There, Hiccup's world flipped. The Night Fury, once the terrifying shadow of the sky, now lay before him, proud but broken. Hiccup learned when to keep his distance, when to offer food, when to scribble frantically in his notebook. He sketched the shape of the torn tail fin over and over, testing designs late into the night, until finally he brought the first clumsy replacement. Toothless had hissed, then tolerated, then, tentatively, trusted. What Hiccup didn't know was that he wasn't alone. Astrid had noticed. She'd noticed how he slipped away after training, how his excuses never lined up, how his bruises weren't from training, but from somewhere else. She'd followed once, silent as she could be, crouched low in the grass above the cove, and what she saw nearly unraveled her. Hiccup, scrawny, useless Hiccup, standing nose to nose with the Night Fury. The dragon wasn't killing him, wasn't even trying. Instead, it leaned into him, letting him touch its snout like a friend. Astrid pressed a hand over her mouth to stop the gasp. She wanted to run back to the village, to tell Gulber or someone else, to bring the whole tribe crashing down on this secret. But something kept her rooted. Maybe it was the look on Hiccup's face, awed, gentle, alive in a way she'd never seen. Maybe it was the dragon itself, not the mindless killer she'd been raised to fight, but wounded, vulnerable, almost human. So she didn't tell. Not yet. She just kept watching, day after day, her suspicion turning to questions she couldn't answer. And every time she left the cove, she felt the weight of a choice pressing harder. Expose Hiccup and the Night Fury, or keep his secret until she knew why he was doing this at all. The roar of horns signaled the fleet's return. Stoic stood grim on the docks, his men weary and empty-handed. The dragon's nest remained unfound, and with it the tribe's hopes of ending the raids. But tradition would not wait. The final day of training had come. In the arena, the crowd pressed close, all eager for the spectacle. Without muttering a word, Gothi chooses Hiccup to be the one who gets the honor of killing the monstrous nightmare. Hiccup felt the blood drain from his face as the gate rattled, chains straining. Everyone in the village celebrated, particularly Stoic. But Hiccup managed to slip out of the party, and Astrid followed him back to his house. "You can't do this," she says urgently. Hiccup tried to joke, but his voice cracked. "Well, that's the plan, isn't it? Prove myself, make Dad proud, maybe not get barbecued in the process." Astrid grabbed his wrist, pulling him closer. "Don't! You're not a killer, Hiccup. I've seen you with him, with the Night Fury." He froze, heart lurching. I followed you," she admitted, eyes narrowing, though not in anger. "I know he's in the cove, and don't even think about lying to me." Hiccup exhaled, shoulders sinking. "His name is Toothless." Astrid blinked. "Toothless?" Then, despite herself, she almost laughed. "That's terrible." "It fits," Hiccup said with a small, helpless smile. Suddenly, from the arena, dragons burst free, terrified, snarling, wings tearing the sky. The pens gave way in a storm of claws and fire. Villagers screamed, scrambling as chaos spread through the square. Astrid and Hiccup ran together, diving out of the way as a grumple smashed through a cart. Before the fire could swallow them, a shadow fell overhead. Toothless. The Night Fury swooped down with lethal grace, blasting a path clear, scooping them from the ground in a rush of wind and power. Hiccup clung to the saddle, Astrid clutching his arm as Toothless soared, then landed them safely beyond the wreckage. Villagers stared in shock, frozen between awe and terror, and among them, Stoic. His eyes widened, not in pride, but in fury. "You trained it?" he thundered, voice carrying over the chaos. Hiccup tried to speak, but his father's face was red with rage, his voice cutting like a blade. "All this time, while your people fought and bled, you hid this monster?" The crowd's whispers rose, half fear, half betrayal, while Toothless stood bristling at Hiccup's side, ready to shield him. The villagers' murmurs turned to shouts. Weapons were raised, nets unfurled. Toothless crouched low, growling, ready to defend. "Take it!" Stoic roared, pointing. "Bind the beast before it kills us all!" "No!" Hiccup's voice cracked, desperate. He threw himself in front of Toothless as ropes and hooks flew. "He won't hurt you. He's not like the others." But Toothless was overwhelmed. A weighted net slammed over him, tangling his wings and legs. He roared, thrashing, blue fire crackling at the corners of his jaw. The ground shook with the force of him fighting against the bonds. "Stop!" Hiccup begged, shoving at the men restraining his dragon. "You're hurting him." "Enough, Hiccup." Stoic's huge hand clamped down on his son's shoulder, yanking him back. His grip was iron, unyielding. Hiccup twisted, reaching for Toothless. "Dad, please, he's my friend." Stoic spun him around, towering over him with a fury that silenced even the crowd. "Friend?" His voice cracked like thunder. "That thing has been killing our people for generations, and you dare call it friend?" Hiccup's chest heaved, his throat tight. "He's not what you think. He's the reason I can't kill dragons. I won't. He's shown me everything we were wrong about." "You don't understand, Dad. There's something else on their island. It's nothing like you've ever seen. It's—" Stoic interrupts. "The nest. You've been there?" "Did I say nest?" Hiccup says. "You will take us there," Stoic demands. "No," Hiccup says. Stoic's face darkened, disbelief hardening into something heavier. "I thought you were finally becoming one of us, but you were deceiving me, deceiving all of us." Astrid, caught at the edge of the crowd, flinched at the venom in his words. She wanted to speak, to defend Hiccup, but her voice stuck in her throat. Stoic leaned in, his voice low, breaking with rage. "You're not my son." The words landed heavier than any blow. Hiccup froze, breath caught, the fight draining out of him all at once. Behind him, Toothless let out a strangled, furious cry as more ropes tightened around him. Stoic shoved Hiccup toward the guards. "Get him out of my sight." Only the creak of ropes and the heavy splash of oars broke the silence as Stoic's fleet rowed out of the bay, Toothless chained down in the belly of the lead longship. Hiccup watched from the cliffs above, his stomach knotted, heart pulling in the same direction as the vanishing sails. Astrid stood beside him, arms crossed, her face grim but not cold. "So, that's it?" she asked. "They're taking your dragon straight to the nest." Hiccup dragged his hands through his hair, pacing. "He's not just my dragon, Astrid. He's my friend, and they're going to use him as bait." His voice cracked. For once, Astrid didn't bark back or tease him. She studied him, then glanced toward the now empty harbor. "You already know the answer. You're just too scared to say it out loud." He squared his shoulders, turned, and sprinted toward the village. Astrid followed without hesitation. Inside the empty training arena, the other teens were still lingering. Snotlout swaggering, the twins arguing over something stupid, Fishlegs muttering dragon stats to himself. They all turned as Hiccup and Astrid burst in. Hiccup stopped in front of them, out of breath, his hands raised as if he were about to present an idea far too crazy to work. "Okay, listen, I know I've never exactly fit in around here, but we don't have much time. My dad's sailing into a death trap, and the only shot we've got at stopping him is—" He pointed toward the pens. "Dragons." The others exchanged bewildered looks. Then Snotlout snorted. Wait. You're saying we just hop on and ride them? Like it's that easy?" Astrid cut in sharply. "It is that easy. If Hiccup can do it, so can we." Hiccup flinched at her bluntness, but Astrid's smirk told him she'd meant it as encouragement. "Trust me," she added, softer. "He knows what he's doing." The twins lit up, Fishlegs stammered, and even Snotlout's cocky grin faltered with the weight of her words. Hiccup pulled the keyring from his belt, stepped toward the pens, and looked back at them all. "Then let's go save Berk." The arena doors opened, and the teens rushed in. Astrid, with Hiccup's help, went straight for the sleek-spined dragon and mounted with ease, its trust earned almost instantly. Snotlout strutted up to the massive fire-breather, nearly getting scorched before it grudgingly accepted him. Fishlegs circled the stocky, rock-like dragon until it waddled over and let him climb aboard. The twins scrambled onto the two-headed beast, wrestling each other more than handling the dragon, yet somehow managing to stay on. Together the group burst from the arena skyward, a chaotic but united force. The fleet of longships cut through the fog, Toothless bound at the lead vessel's bow. The Vikings prepared for battle, but when the rocky cliffs split open and the monstrous queen emerged, their confidence shattered. The Red Death rose from the depths, wings like mountains, its roar shaking the sea itself. On the horizon, a ragged cluster of dragons appeared, and the teens. Astrid led the charge, her dragon weaving gracefully through the storm of fire. Snotlout shouted triumphantly, while barely steering straight, his dragon spitting gouts of flame at the queen. Fishlegs clung for dear life, but his mount's brute strength slammed into the monster's wing. The twins turned their bickering into chaos, each head of their dragon firing in opposite directions, distracting the behemoth just long enough to keep it unbalanced. Above it all, Hiccup dove on Toothless, cutting through the smoke. Toothless's tail fin gleamed with the makeshift prosthetic, jerking with every turn but holding strong. Astrid covered him at every dive, lancing the Red Death's eyes with precision strikes, buying Toothless the opening he needed. The queen raged, slamming ships aside, crushing rocks under its massive weight. Vikings fought to stay afloat, but Stoic's voice carried over the din, rallying them. His eyes tracked Hiccup and Astrid, his son and the girl he trusted most, circling the monster with fearless resolve. Astrid and the deadly natter dropped Hiccup over Toothless and broke him out. Realizing the Red Death had wings, Hiccup and Toothless lure the beast into the sky into a fearsome firefight, leaving the sky thick with black smoke. Hiccup and Toothless shot beneath the Red Death's jaw, fire surging upward in a blinding blast. The queen thrashed, stumbled, and plummeted into the sea in an explosion of smoke and flame. When the sky cleared, the dragons circled above the wreckage. The teens clung to their mounts, singed but alive. For the first time, the battlefield was silent. Not from loss, but from awe. Dragons and Vikings hovered on the edge of something new. The world was quiet when Hiccup opened his eyes. The smell of smoke and salt lingered, faint against the rush of clean air through the open window. He stirred, wincing at the ache in his body, only to realize he wasn't alone. Astrid sat in a chair beside the bed, arms crossed but eyes soft, a bruise still shadowing her cheek from Toothless's tail. "You're awake," she said, relief breaking through her stern mask. Hiccup tried to sit up, but she pushed him gently back. "Take it easy. You were out for days." His hand slid instinctively to his side and froze. The blankets dipped lower than they should have. His left leg was gone, replaced with a sturdy metal prosthetic. His breath caught, but before panic could set in, Astrid's hand covered his. "You're still you," she whispered. "Still Hiccup, and you saved us all." The door creaked open, and Stoic stepped in, filling the room with his presence. He looked tired, humbled, but when his gaze met Hiccup, repairing huts, hauling supplies, even playing with children. Stormfly perched on a rooftop as Astrid's parents tossed scraps up to her. The twins' dragon sat contentedly in the square, heads bickering over scraps of meat. Fishleg's bulky companion was already harnessed to a cart, pulling lumber with ease. And there, waiting patiently just beyond the threshold, was Toothless. The Night Fury's eyes were fixed on Hiccup, a low rumble in his throat that was neither growl nor purr, but something in between. Astrid smiled, then leaned down, pressing a quick, unexpected kiss to Hiccup's cheek. "Come on," she said, standing and offering him her arm. "Let's show them how it's done." Hiccup swung his legs over the bed, awkward, unsteady, but with Astrid at his side and Toothless waiting, he felt something new. Not the dread that had weighed on him all his life, but hope. For the first time, Berk wasn't at war. Berk was home, and dragons were part of it.